She is in her 30s and doesn't make friends or fall in love. She lives alone, going from point A to B. Every day, her biggest hobby is looking down at her phone. The sound coming from the headphones isolates her from everything around her. Even if a neighbor greets her, she will pretend not to hear. She doesn't want to have too much contact with strangers, nor does she want anyone to intrude into her closed life. After returning home, she eats cheap takeout and watches cliched variety shows to find happiness. Suddenly, there was a violent vibration in the house. Susie didn't think much about it and continued to eat. As long as it wasn't the end of the world, everything outside the house seemed to have nothing to do with her. Half an hour later, Susie suddenly smelled a foul odor when she went out. She called the property management company to complain, saying that her life had been affected. After get off work that night, she saw several policemen coming to the corridor. She learned from the landlady that the person living next door was also a single person in his 30s. He was crushed to death by a collapsed cabinet. The time of death was about half a month ago. Susie suddenly realized that this might be the reason for the house shaking that night. She was more or less guilty. If she could go out to understand the situation at that time, maybe she could save a life. At the same time, she also felt a sense of inexplicable helplessness and sadness. If the person trapped under the cabinet was herself, the result would probably be the same. Susie's job is a telephone customer service. Her job content is to promote products and provide after-sales service. She can handle all kinds of customers calmly. The sentence she said most often is, "I'm sorry," because this sentence can solve any difficult and complicated problems. But this machine's work content is like that of a human being, and it also makes her feel more and more numb to life. One day, the leader suddenly gave her a task to guide a new intern. Susie subconsciously chose to refuse because she almost forgot how to communicate with people face to face. But because she is the best customer service in the department, she had to bite the bullet and agree. The new intern is a young girl, and her eyes reveal the innocence and enthusiasm of a child, while Susie's face is full of impatience and disgust. The work content is very simple. I have nothing to teach you. You just need to follow the employee manual. Afterwards, Susie worked as usual as if no one was around and completely ignored the intern next to her. The bored intern could only find fun on his own, tearing paper towels and fiddling with the mirror on the table. When it came to the lunch break, the intern had fallen into a deep sleep. There is an hour break at noon. Maybe she realized that Susie didn't like her, so she took the initiative to show her courtesy during work in the afternoon, but Susie was as indifferent as always. The girl began to listen carefully to the conversation between Susie and the customer, and Susie just answered mechanically, "Thank you for your valuable suggestions. We will definitely work hard to improve. If there are no other questions, I will hang up first." The intern was very confused. What the other party said was obviously a fantasy. Why did Susie give such a sure answer? Susie pointed out. Pointing to the notes on the computer screen, she said, "This person has a problem in his brain. We often encounter customers like this. But no matter what kind of person he is, we just treat him like a child and coax him. If he is happy, no unnecessary trouble will arise." The intern seemed to understand what she said. The work manual clearly stated that customers' questions should be answered patiently. The next day at work, the girl brought a new gift, a bottle of throat spray. We talk all day at work. It is good for the throat to spray it occasionally. However, Susie put it on the table without any interest. The girl enthusiastically invited her to try it. When pushing and shoving, she accidentally pressed the bottle, and the medicine sprayed all over Susie's face. This time she finally couldn't help but complain, "Can you please stop bothering me?" to express her apology. The girl wanted to invite Susie to have lunch together. Susie let the girl follow her to the restaurant, but she neither accepted the girl's kindness nor ordered for the girl. After she ordered, she gestured to the girl, "You eat yours and I'll eat mine." Then she left without looking back. The seats here are obviously more spacious, but in order to avoid the girl, Susie slowly sat in a crowded place. The girl tried to answer the phone for the first time during work in the afternoon. Maybe because she was in a depressed mood, she was a little overwhelmed by the customer's excited questioning. Susie on the side quickly reminded her to say sorry and apologize to the customer quickly, but the girl was reluctant to speak. Susie had to transfer the customer to herself, and then began to apologize and comfort her non-stop. The girl suddenly asked unwillingly, "I obviously didn't do anything wrong. Why do you have to make me apologize?" In the end, the customer called the complaint hotline. The two were called to the office by the leader for a lecture. The leader just asked the intern to pay more attention in the future, but pointed the finger at Susie. "Why didn't you teach her well? Why did you let her make such a low-level mistake under your nose?" Susie felt aggrieved. "I was doing well. Why did you have to assign me such an assignment?" After get off work, her father suddenly called and asked her to go home to sign an agreement. After her mother passed away, she left a house that was neither big nor small. The will originally stated that Susie would inherit it, but her father suddenly intervened and said, "Either you come back to live with me, or give up the right to inherit the house." As a result, Susie signed the declaration of release of inheritance without any hesitation. She would rather rent a house outside than live under the same roof with her father. Because her father abandoned his wife and daughter and ran away from home when she was very young, she has been living with her mother all these years. She had no feelings for her father, whom she had not seen for more than 10 years. Or rather, she had never forgiven her father in her heart, but she still could not help turning on the surveillance camera and observing her father's every move at home. This was the camera installed before to look after her mother, but now it has become her only way to understand her father. Sometimes her father would sit alone at home in a daze, and sometimes he would touch her mother's portrait and cry. It was a little hard for Susie to understand. If he was so reluctant to let her go, why was he so heartless when he left? After work that day, Susie met a man on crutches at the door of her house. The other party was here to rent a house, but he was very curious why this empty room was so cheap. Susie answered truthfully that it was because someone had died in this room not long ago, and then he fled back to his own home without paying any attention. In the evening, she turned on the mobile surveillance camera again. Her father was having a dinner party with the neighbors at home, and her mother's portrait was placed on the dining table. The happy scene made Susie a little jealous. Why was her father happier than her when they both lived alone? The next morning, Susie was awakened by a noisy sound. It turned out that the people next door were moving. The tenant who moved in was the man who asked her about it last night. The 3 friends of the man helped him move. The group of people were so happy, but such a scene was particularly glaring to Susie. After seeing Susie, the man took the initiative to come to thank her. He also invited Susie to visit his home in the evening. After work that day, the intern girl suddenly told Susie that she couldn't sleep last night. Every time she closed her eyes, the beeping sound of the phone being connected would ring in her mind. This is a common occupational disease. But Susie didn't say anything to comfort her. It seems that it is difficult to express concern to others. Coincidentally, the girl also received a call from the client with the note mental patient. But the girl not only did not perfunctorily respond, but also patiently listened to the other person's nonsense. It was at this moment that Susie saw her former self in the girl. She was also full of enthusiasm at that time. She listened attentively to every call she answered, but the irony was that the performance of her sincere treatment was at the bottom every month, and she was often complained about. When she learned to speak to people in a way that suited them, she became the employee with the best performance. Perhaps it was not a bad thing to have a friend like the intern girl, but when she went to work the next day, she found out that the girl had resigned. Susie suddenly felt empty and was absent-minded at work and made frequent mistakes. At lunch, the delicious food that she never got tired of on weekdays became bland. She felt the world was so quiet for the first time. She had the old problem of auditory hallucination again, so she always read the wrong orders to customers. At that moment, Susie's long-suppressed emotions completely collapsed. After get off work in the evening, she wandered aimlessly on the noisy streets, as if she was abandoned by the world. Only she was accompanied by her lonely shadow under the street lamp. When she returned home, she found that the door of her new neighbor's house was not closed. The man was paying homage to his deceased neighbor with his friends. They had never met before, but they conveyed their emotions in this special way. Susie was deliberately rejecting the people around her. This secretive attitude also made her life worse and worse. She closed her eyes and leaned against the door to feel the atmosphere in the house, trying to find a trace of resonance with the stranger. After a while, the man came outside to smoke and said, "Come in and have a meal together." "I'm good at cooking this time." Susie did not refuse and stood with the man and chatted. That night, Susie's attitude towards people and things changed a lot. She took the initiative to call the intern girl and said sincerely, in fact, "I don't like eating alone. I don't like taking the bus alone. And I don't like living alone. I'm just pretending to be myself so that I look like I'm doing well." She apologized to the girl for her previous indifference. Unlike the apology she often said on the phone at work, this time her apology was very sincere. After waking up the next day, she decided to change her lifestyle. She opened the curtains that had been closed for many years, and the dark room suddenly became bright. She and her leader submitted her resignation. She officially said goodbye to this numbing job. She had no plans for the future. She suddenly thought of her father, who also lived alone. Then she calmly called her father for the first time. The father was confused by the words, but after hanging up the phone, Susie changed the number note to her father. The emotional entanglement of many years was also released at this moment. This is a story with a plain plot, but like a mirror, It reflects a special emotion buried deep in the hearts of many people. The indescribable loneliness is not because of living alone or without company, but because life is so lively and orderly. The information age has shortened the distance between people, but turned away the crash between souls and hearts. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and like the video to help our channel out.